Hey guys, today we're talking about how to stop fear in crisis. And right now, in the midst of C19, I feel like this is a really important issue for us to talk about. I feel like there is a lot of people out there that could benefit from just the idea of how to stop fear in a time of crisis. But also there's a lot of people out there that are fearing things right now, practically in this moment. And honestly, like there is a lot of uncertainty out there, and that's really where a lot of the fear is coming from. Is this uncertain future that we're all trying to get, or all trying to walk out. And honestly, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or next week. We don't know if our loved ones will be safe. We don't know if we're going to keep our jobs or have income. We don't know how bad things might get, and the list goes on and on. And so it's warranted, some of this fear. It's warranted that we actually are experiencing some of this uncertainty. So it's also important for us to understand too, that there's this idea of bad news and no news, and how we as people react to it as well. And generally, people handle bad news better than no news. For instance, you've probably seen those shows where there's, the doctor who comes into the doctor's office to sort of deliver the bad news, or deliver some of the, that there's this death of someone that has happened that's dear to them, and like they take a minute to sort of fumble through that announcement, and the person's just kind of waiting, like, just tell me already, just tell me, like, what is the bad news? And really it just becomes evident to us that it has to do with just how we are as people, is that we better handle, just give me the bad news. Just tell me straight up how bad things are, rather than no news at all. And our minds tend to sort of fill in the blanks when there's no information steering us to a destination. This is just naturally how we work, and we fill in the gaps. And so today we want to just help us really, and I think this is a good statement from Craig Rochelle, is we want to be able to think long-term, but plan short-term. And so we want to have the mentality that long-term we might have to endure what's happening right now, or if you're watching this video later on after COVID-19 things happening, we may have a situation where we know we have to endure for a long time. And so how can we have that strong long-term mindset, but also be planning for the short term at the same time? So we need to be asking ourselves that question. There's also two false truths about emotions that we need to go through. And just as a caveat here, this might be a little bit hard to hear, because honestly, for some of us, maybe we've never taken responsibility of our emotions, never thought of our emotions like this. But there's two things that we need to really, really understand. This false idea that emotions come from others, not from me. The truth is that emotions don't settle upon you like a cloud, nor are they thrust upon you by others. Others don't make you fear. You make you fear. You make you anxious. You make you scared. I know that's really hard for us to internalize sometimes. I know for me, even just hearing that, it's hard to know that it's not the external world that makes me feel things. And although the external world does trigger certain emotions for me, but ultimately, I am in control of my emotions. The next thing that we want to talk about that's false is that emotions are uncontrollable and unstoppable. So once we feel an emotion, it's like, I can't stop it. I can't just let it, I can't keep it from playing out in my life. And the truth is you can't control your emotions once they're felt. You have two options when it comes to your emotions. You can act on them or be acted on by them. And so what I want to do today is to help you find what I call a path to action, to take control of your emotions and understand where they come from and how they affect your behavior, so that you can own that process a little bit better. So today I want to talk about what I said, a path to action. And it looks like this. And it starts with this idea of that we see and hear things around us. We tell ourselves a story. We feel something from that story, and then we act on those emotions. So I want to break this down a little bit further for us. So in this see and hear category, the idea is I see on the news that COVID-19 has reached Manitoba. Toilet paper is nowhere to be found. Government leaders are giving warnings and addresses about social distancing, etc., and the death toll is rising. So that's what's happening around me. I see I hear news, and sometimes we choose to indulge more in those news sources than others. Some of us are like, no, I just want to like close all this stuff down because, the more I see, the more I hear, the more it actually makes me frantic, which is understandable. But then we move into this idea that we tell ourselves a story after all of those things. And so I think to myself, gee, my daughter Stella has pre-existing conditions. If she got sick, it would place a further strain on her body and cause her to die. And so after I've noticed all these things, I initially start telling myself these narratives that just start coming to mind. And then those narratives, they lead me to feel something. So then comes the fear, the anxiety, and the worry. So this is where all the emotions now are starting to stir up, to bubble up inside of us. And then once they do, it causes us to act. This is where the behavior aspect of us comes out. And so then I start to say, well, I need to protect Stella at all costs. I need to wrap her in a hazmat suit, lock her down in her room, and allow no contact with other people or the outside world. And so now my behavior is just, I'm just going out there and I'm doing all I can to salvage the situation because my emotions are so high and they're leading me to do things. So here's the crucial aspect of this, is that it's the tell a story aspect that we really need to focus on. And we need to understand that this idea that stories create feelings that influence actions. And this is how it works. This is the critical part of this, is just after we see and hear what others do, and just before we feel some emotions, we tell ourselves a story. A narrative happens inside of us. So we add meaning to the actions we observe. We make a guess at the motive driving the behavior. So, for instance, why was Trudeau so serious about his deliverance in his press conference? Like, why are people rushing to the grocery stores and grabbing anything? Like, why is there no toilet paper out there? And so we start to add meaning that actually may not be there in the first place once we start to in this storytelling process. We also add judgment, both good and bad judgment, but that judgment then is based on these stories, and our body responds to those emotions. It responds to those stories. And so sometimes the judgment is good for us to cast judgment, but also we need to recognize that we do have bad judgment at times. And then once those emotions start, it becomes almost impossible to stop them from impacting our behavior and our functions. It's really hard to stop emotion, especially strong, volatile emotion like fear, and it becomes sort of visceral in our behaviors. Also, even if you don't realize it, you are telling yourself a story at all moments. Like, this is happening so fast internally, and without actually checking it, a lot of the times, like, it's just we are just inventing stories or judging situations, or our emotions are just constantly churning because of these stories we're telling us. So we need to be very visual of that. And then it happens blindingly fast. So when we believe that we're at risk, we tell ourselves a story so quickly that we don't even know that we're doing it. So it becomes important to catch that. So what's the answer to this whole thing? This is what I call change the story. We need to work on changing the story. We need to go back to that moment or catch ourselves in that state. So the first step is to regain emotional control. The first step to regaining emotional control is to challenge the illusion that your feeling is the only right emotion under the circumstances. So that's the first step. There could be a whole plethora of ways that you interact with this thing, or there could be a whole bunch of reactions to it. And the first step is just recognizing that what I'm feeling, there could be many different feelings or reactions to this as well. And if we take control of our stories, they won't take control of us. And so that's why this is so important. And if you can tell different stories to ourselves and break this loop, in fact, until we tell different stories, we can't actually break the loop. So it's important for us to go back to that moment. So we need to retrace our path. And so the first thing we do is we take notice of our behavior or your behavior, and we ask ourselves some questions. So how am I acting right now? And what's making me act this way? And this may be difficult to do in certain moments because it takes a little time to get down to the root of those feelings. But just if we're feeling like our behavior is pushing us to do something, then it's good to start asking this question. What's making me act this way in the first place? And then we need to get in touch with how we feel. So we need to ask, what am I feeling right now? Like, what is actually going on inside of me? Am I scared? Am I sad? Am I mad? Am I disappointed? Like, what is the feeling behind this thing? And then we need to get down to the analyzing our story aspect. So we need to ask, what story did I tell myself that created these emotions? What am I thinking internally that may happen, or what kind of judgment am I casting onto this situation that I need to get a hold of? So what's the story that I'm telling myself? And then we need to get back to the facts. So we need to ask, what evidence do I have to support this story? And this is where we might need to go and gather some more facts to actually help us, because sometimes our bad stories are created out of a limitation of facts. And then we need to do this. So we need to tell a useful story, and I use this acronym called TALK to help us do that. First, we need to take in all the facts. Gather all the facts and details before you start making a story or drawing a judgment. So don't be so quick to translate it into a story, the facts that we gather. Well, we use isolated information that creates a confirmation bias and starts an echo chamber of thought. So we need to take in all the facts and consider all the facts when rewriting a story. Next, we need to announce a new story. We need to tell a story that creates emotions that lead you to healthy actions. Healthy emotions can look like love, gratitude, joy, peace, hope, thankfulness, etc. And we need to actually sort of make up a new narrative, an honest new narrative. I'm not saying like make up a false one or make up some kind of story or try to con yourself into believing something else. I'm saying after you've taken all the facts, really tell yourself an honest, good story and healthy story. And then after we do that, we want to let it play out. This is the aspect where we allow our positive emotions to impact our new behavior. And so hopefully our new story will sprout new healthy emotions and impact our behavior in a good way. And then we need to keep our behavior in control. So continue to take notice of our behavior, continue to evaluate what's happening, and to make sure that we're not going back to our original story. So we may need to at that point in time still continue to ask ourselves some questions. What's driving this behavior? What am I feeling right now? What kind of story am I telling myself? Do I need to go get some better facts? And so that may happen on a normal basis, that we're continuing to go through that process. But that's actually a healthy process for us to go through, and that we want to continue to sort of continue to evaluate our lives and our actions in that light. So I hope this was really helpful for you in this time, but even beyond this time. My name is Scott, and we'll see you next time.